And welcome back to Continue Freedom. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. If you are a returning guest, I want to thank you so much for coming back. I truly, truly appreciate it because y'all are the ones that are helping us. Our next goal is obviously 1,000 subscribers, but help us get to 10,000 too. That's where we want. So when the day comes, I think I've got something special in mind for the people that are early subscribers. Once I hit 1 million, then you know what? There's going to be something big going down when that day comes. But let's go ahead and take a look at something positive. You know, we've seen the Hurricane Helene and the devastating impact that it's had on people. And I want to show you, this is from Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil has been traveling around that area doing some amazing stuff. And I want to share this with you all because it's a heartwarming story.
So, let me introduce you real quick to Dr. Phil. You watch TV, you may have seen him on TV.
How are you? We were driving down this gravel road here to head up to a location to set up a Starlink unit, and this wonderful lady flagged us down named Sue. She's 83 and she lives in this cute little house here. And she came out and said, you know, I don't want to cause any trouble, but could somebody help me? She said, I'm here, I don't have any power, I don't have any water, I don't have any food, I don't have any ability to get anywhere. I had heart surgery 2 weeks ago.
If I had a generator and be one of them Coleman stoves and some of them little things I can stay at home.
Well, we get you one. If you could just drop one off, but it's not that simple. You gotta get it and get a bright plug, hook it up to the breaker box, get the house turned on, hook it up to her well, get water going. We've already got a generator here. We're fueling it up right now. We actually had one with us in our caravan, so we're already got her hooked up to a generator. But we got to get it turned on, get the right kind of plug, and then get things going. She just had heart surgery, and she's here by herself. She's fallen. She got a mark on her forehead here. She went from just being so forlorn to being so uplifted and laughing, and I'm just so glad we stopped, so glad she flagged us down.
It's so lonesome I can't hardly go.
We're going to continue on and set up this Starlink that Elon Musk has provided to us and get it hooked up. By the time we get back, I think we'll have everything set up and get her turned on. It's just a typical story of a person up here lost, isolated, needing help. So glad we stopped. So glad she flagged us down.
I love this. I love stories like that. You know, it's the beauty of it's kind of an independence type story. Like, you know, we're Americans and we can rely on our neighbors and the people around us in our true times of need. And, you know, I talk about politics, and we're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about some of the nefarious nature of government and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, when you see people of means who are able to rally resources and get out and help people, it's really a beautiful thing. And I just wanted to share something positive, you know, because it's so easy to talk about the negative. And we're going to talk about the negative today. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, I mentioned in my last video, my buddy Chuck, and he and his wife, he's from this area, but he hasn't lived here for 20 some odd years. He's been off living his life. And when disaster strikes our area, he and his wife rallied. And she's not from here. She's from Texas. But they rallied their resources and were able to bring some stuff to the people in need. Dr. Phil is doing the same thing. So I just think it's awesome. And we need to celebrate those things. Now, from that, I'm going to make a hard left-hand turn. And I'm going to talk about this storm itself. Now, think what you want about this guy. I get it. He's quirky. He's different. But he has released some stuff that got me going down a rabbit hole, and I started watching. But Alex Jones on InfoWars, don't turn it off. Don't turn off just yet, because I know I have to. He's one of those guys you have to take things in doses. You have to say, okay, some of this just seems wildly out there, and some of this stuff may have some merit. So let's listen to some of this interview really quick, or some of this broadcast really quick, and then I'm going to get into some very specific historical details about what he's discussing.
Congress is now confirming that Hurricane Helene did have U.S. government weather weapon planes in it. Now, we already have the tracks. We already have the tail numbers. They don't even hide this crap. It just broke. It's on Infowars.com. Breaking. Lawmakers briefed on weather modification tech conclude Hurricane Helene was DOD-linked weather weapon deployed against American people. Bombshell. There's Dale Whittington, who we're getting on the show, I think, tomorrow. So there you go, of Geoengineering Watch with Colonel McGregor. Let's go ahead and air these two clips back to back.
The question here is, how does this hurricane's path differ from others that we've seen? I've already had a lot of people call me from the Asheville area, talk specifically about the horrendous damage, and many of them pointed out that that is not Hurricane Alley per se. It's not an area that normally attracts storms. Can you help us understand this?
Well, the bottom line is it was directed there, as the transmission recordings clearly show. They kept that moisture corralled there to deluge in the same location. So again, these are patented technologies, and the fact that we have the entire so-called meteorological community denying that this is going on to protect their paychecks and pensions is absolutely criminal at this point. We know we have private defense contractors that are neck deep in the patents that manipulate these storms, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. We know those two in particular do the weather modeling for the nation's weathermen, National Weather Service and NOAA. Again, both agencies have an illegal federal gag order on them. So at this point, this is an emperor has no clothes moment. That's the best description I can give for something that is so blatantly obvious and inarguable, can only be considered weather warfare at this point. And the fact that, again, the so-called science community is denying this manipulation is criminal.
Okay. Before we go on, and I could play, this was it was a very lengthy clip. I think it's about 5 minutes long. I'm not going to play the whole thing. So we're talking about NOAA, and I'm going to read some stuff to you directly from NOAA. This isn't from a conspiracy theory website, which is what a lot of people are going to say about InfoWars and Alex Jones. Oh, it's conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy theory. And I'm going to try to make this as entertaining as possible, though I don't know how particularly to do that because I'm literally reading from NOAA's website. So this isn't from, again, not from a conspiratorial website. This is from NOAA. And this is from their website, the 70th anniversary of the first hurricane seeding experiment. So, the previous year, Vincent Schaefer, working at General Electric, so GE was one of the instigators of this technology, discovered that by introducing dry ice or solid carbon dioxide into an environment with supercooled water, which is water that is colder than 32 degrees Fahrenheit but has not yet frozen, he could induce the water to freeze into ice. He realized that this could be done in the free atmosphere and could spur microphysical reactions that would alter clouds and precipitation. This is in 1947, by the way. So this is, post-World War II. This is early technology. And so the article goes on to say, however, it wasn't until late in the following hurricane season that Air Force planes and Navy personnel became available to carry out the mission. On October 12th, a hurricane designated King by the Air Force Hurricane Office moved northeastward over Florida, dumping tropical downpours on the southern end, which caused damaging flooding that persisted for days. The next day, this is about prior to them actually doing any seeding. The next day, the storm moved over the coast and continued out to sea. This seemed an ideal case for Project Cirrus, which I mentioned in my last episode, as the hurricane was no longer interacting with land and should not affect anyone after the experiment. So they were trying to be responsible about this in 1947. That afternoon, two B-17s and a B-29 left Mobile, Alabama, and flew eastward to intercept the hurricane. The first bomber flew at cloud top level and did the seeding. Large chunks of dry ice were fed into a crusher on the plane and dumped from the belly into the clouds below. The second B-17 followed a half mile behind and 3,000 feet above the 3,000 feet above the document the clouds above. That might be a typo. The cloud changes. Above to document the cloud changes. The trailing B-26 was the control aircraft and carried Schaefer to monitor the changes and direct the other two planes. So you have a three-plane formation. One of them is dropping the dry ice. One of them is looking at the change, and the other is more or less the C-2 or command and control aircraft. They didn't have sophisticated homing gear, so it was decided not to penetrate the eye or heavy rain bands of the hurricane, but seed the outer clouds. So they went around the outside of this hurricane. They made a half-hour run over 100 miles long, dumping 80 pounds of ice along the way. They backtracked, went to see what the clouds had done. Next, they did 2 mass droppings of 50 pounds each into one large cumulus top and orbited the cloud to see any changes. They noticed that after the first run, the cloud deck began to break up. After the second test, the cloud top continued to grow. Satisfied with their effort, the planes returned to base, so they went on back. They said that's it. The scientists were eager to examine the storm the following day. However, when they flew to the predicted storm location, they had trouble locating the eye. After some hunting around, they found the hurricane center nearly 100 miles west of where they expected it to be. To their astonishment, the hurricane had made a 135-degree turn and was now moving due west. On top of that, it was strengthened. By the afternoon of the 15th, Hurricane King struck Savannah, Georgia. 1 person died in the storm surge, and $2 million in damage was done to Georgia and South Carolina. This was released to the public. It says, again, NOAA's website, not conspiracy theory websites, NOAA's website, noaa.gov. The public was outraged that the scientists had caused the storm to swerve into Georgia, and threats of lawsuits were thrown about. GE's case was not helped. This is GE doing this, by the way. When the head of its laboratories, Dr. Irving Langmeyer, I don't know how you pronounce that, issued a statement that was 99% sure the storm had changed course due to the seeding. Chief of the Weather Bureau, Dr. Francis Reichelderfer, thought different and appointed 3 of his weathermen to find a case where a hurricane had followed a similar track but had not been seeded. So basically, the guy who was in charge of the whole thing said, I am 99% sure that what we did changed the course of the hurricane. And GE sweeps in and says, okay, look, find 3 scientists, we'll pay them, and tell everybody that this wasn't because of what we did, because we have to avoid lawsuits, all the damage, and all of these things. It was an ambitious experimental program of research on hurricane modification carried out between 1962 and 1983. So it started in 47, and then in an era, I'll read this part because I shouldn't have skipped over this, but in an era when many science fiction movies featured mad scientists threatening world destruction or worse from their hubris, this event seemed to fit the trope. For many years after, no scientist dared mention weather modification and hurricane in the same sentence. 11 years later, the National Hurricane Research Project carried out very modest seeding equipment tests in hurricanes, but kept things on the down low, kept things quiet, hidden, until they were sure the storm wasn't going to pull a swerve on them. It wasn't until 1962 that the U.S. Weather Bureau and Department of Defense reached a formal agreement to carry out Project Storm Fury, and they once again started seeding hurricanes. And so between 1962 and 1983, this all continued. Now they're using not just dry ice or not dry ice, but silver iodide, the things that we are seeing in cloud seeding today. That in Dubai, you can watch it clearly on the internet. I probably should have pulled up the video, but I didn't. They have an entire center that is based on cloud seeding, weather creation, weather manipulation. And people say, well, our government, this is the thing. This is where people automatically start to go to this is conspiracy theory. The government would never use this against its own people. Remember, the first people to do it was not the federal government. It was GE, the largest enterprise on earth, I believe. I don't know if it still is or not. But why on earth? Look, we could say Alex Jones said it in his post. In his broadcast, that we have the tail numbers, so they have the DOD tail numbers of the aircraft that were flying over it. And the weather channels will say, well, no, these are just people flying over the storms to monitor what it's doing. There are very specific storm tracks that I don't understand, which is why I'm not going to post them, of aircraft taking off from Texas, flying into the storm, and making odd, strange motions all around this storm and then returning to Texas. We know that military aircraft, from video with telephoto lenses, people are able to see military aircraft cloud seeding today. Why on earth would they want to do this? What could possibly motivate them to do something like this?
A reality. The company says North Carolina has approved its mining permit, but the biggest hurdle to get the project over the finish line could still be on the horizon.
Now, people living here in Cherryville have been fighting against plans for a lithium mine for years. The company's CEO, Keith Phillips, released a statement yesterday saying...
Oops.
What have we here? What have we here?
Mining operation a reality. The company says North Carolina has approved its mining permit, but the biggest hurdle to get the project over the finish line could still be on the horizon.
Now, people living here in Cherryville have been fighting against plans for a lithium mine for years. The company's CEO, Keith Phillips, released a statement yesterday saying it plans to develop Carolina Lithium as one of the lowest cost, most sustainable lithium hydroxide operations in the world and as a critical part of the American electric vehicle supply chain.
I was a little shocked to see 11 and a half years. I'd always heard it was going to be like 15 to 25. That's even more concerning. It's only going to be 11 years to disrupt all these people and their homes and their property and their water over 11-year project.
If that area has been inundated, is in a disaster zone, then the government can come in and do eminent domain and they can pay you what it was worth 5 years ago rather than what it's worth right now. I'm sure this is just another coincidence, but do you know who owns the most shares in that lithium mine? BlackRock and Vanguard.
There's no military. There's no one's doing nothing. It blows my mind. And they're not even allowing people to see what's really going on.
The Federal Emergency Management Association, better known as FEMA, is now arresting volunteers.
What have we?
So the key piece to that was not the people saying that FEMA's arresting volunteers or any of that, but the fact that BlackRock, an organization that I've speak about on a regular basis because they are at the center of every conspiracy theory, where nations are toppled, where social unrest is to be found, where corrupt politicians are to be found. The common thread consistently, I talked about it just in East Tennessee in the real estate market. The World Economic Forum says that you will own nothing and you will be happy. They want to turn the world into renters. And when 1 in 4 homes being sold are being sold by one real estate agency, and BlackRock, through a subsidiary company that it's the majority, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard are the majority stakeholders in, Compass Realty, or Compass, I don't know if it's Compass Realty, but Compass comes in and buys this so that 1 in 4 homes being sold in Tennessee profit, not just Compass, but BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, the same people who are buying up entire neighborhoods across the entire country, and who's also the key investor in lithium and, by the way, quartz, which is in that area, and quartz being used in smartphones and smart devices. Do we think that the little old lady up in the mountains is of any type of concern to people who are literally on a path that is world domination is their ultimate goal? Globalism. You will own nothing and you will be happy. You will be the pod people. You will be the ones who are subservient to the larger people who will give you everything that you need, right? You'll get you've probably heard about the bugs and, finding ways to replace meat. They will give you your bug paste. They will give you your whatever you need, not what you want, not what you're striving for, what you need. One little old lady is simply a hurdle, the one that Dr. Phil was helping. People losing their homes, look, they'll get something, 20 cents on the dollar, but they'll get something. Not enough to get ahead in life. And the federal government has been doing this since 1947 in conjunction with GE. Do we not? I mean, it's not. It doesn't sound like conspiracy theory to me. This seems like a reasonable course of action for nefarious actors to gain control over the people. Sorry I had to read all that. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. I'm going to give you the kicker. But this is this is why they go after Donald Trump, right? This is why they go after Donald Trump, because Trump is He's the antithesis of these people. Yeah, he's a rich guy, but he was self-interested. So Donald Trump was out to make money for himself, to make money for his family. And if you listen to him on, all these podcasts, but I forget the guy. I watched the whole thing today. In fact, let me pause here and I'm going to find. Yeah, it was on the Flagrant podcast. And so they're at 2 million views right now. This guy he just cares about the country. All his rhetoric and all that stuff. But they are doing anything that they possibly can to try to arrest him. Why? Because he's disrupting all of this. He's the one who's trying to return the power to the people, not to GE, not to General Dynamics, not to Lockheed or Boeing or any of these people. He's trying to return the power to the people, and so they come after him in any possible way they can, even if that is in some ridiculous way, which is trying to arrest him over comments that he made on illegal immigrants. Ohio courts declined to issue an arrest warrant for Trump and Vance over comments on Haitian immigrants. After a nonprofit filed a criminal complaint against former President Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, for their remarks about Haitian migrants eating pets in Springfield, Ohio, an Ohio judicial panel determined there was no reason to issue arrest warrants for either of them, possibly because there's now video taken out the corner of somebody's home of a Haitian migrant cutting up a domesticated dog in their yard. Wasn't their dog, I don't believe. It was somebody else's dog. But now we've seen video evidence of these sorts of things. So Trump's the bad guy. And I'm going to play you another video. This one's very interesting because this guy does, and I'm actually going to play the whole thing. It's a few minutes long, so bear with me on that one. But the lawfare against him, simply because he's fighting against these nefarious agencies who since the 40s have been experimenting on weather, on people. You can go to the V word, the dreaded V word that I can't say anymore because YouTube will ban folks. Having to do with Big Pharma. He's fighting back against these sorts of things, and he's disrupting the plan. The people that are okay for the greater good, it's okay to experiment on the American people. But we got to make Trump out to be the bad guy because he's not of the Bush, Obama, Cheney, Clinton, the political establishment, the long-term political establishment. He's not part of the club. And we can't have somebody outside the club showing up and changing things. But listen to this. This is really interesting.
So the Trump fraud case went before the appellate court this week, and by the time it was over, the closing arguments of the Democrat lawyers was just them begging to not get sanctioned. So look, many people aren't aware that the Trump fraud case went before the appeals court this week. And if you don't know how an appeals court works, there are 5 judges that sit in judgment for these cases. And they basically let the prosecution and the defense both lay out their cases. And their job is to consider whether or not the case was worth hearing in the first place. And it went so badly for the Democrat lawyers that by the end of it, their closing arguments was just them begging to not get sanctioned. So they argued a ton of different things throughout this case. But the biggest thing was the judges kept interrupting them. They kept saying, hold on. Can you find me one other time in history where the person who took the loan was able to call the bank that they took the loan from, and then that bank showed up and said, we weren't defrauded? And the lawyers spent like 2 hours trying to find one little instance where it happened. But then the judges said, okay, let's try something else. They said, hey, have you ever prosecuted someone for lying about the value of a property when it resulted in the entire loan being paid back with interest? And again, they gave them like 2 hours to try to explain their case, and they still couldn't produce a single case where that had happened. And then the judges said, hey, you know what? We'll give you another shot. They said, have you ever seen an attorney general prosecute a case where there was no damage to the public, there was no damage to the person you said was defrauded, and there was no actual malice committed by the person who took the loan? And then they took another like 6 hours on that one. And by the end of it, the judges were like, so you don't have any instance of that happening? And then by the time they were done, the judges were like, I don't even know if this is a case that should have been brought. And they said, look, y'all might need to be sanctioned for bringing this case in a malicious manner. One of the judges actually said, I have come to believe that since a case like this has never been brought in the history of the country, not only New York, that you have only brought this case because the person was running for president.
And this is, of course, true. So he just did a really good job explaining it. But in a case where they are saying that he defrauded people by inflating the value of Mar-a-Lago and taking out a loan, the bank goes on to say in this testimony that no, we gave him the loan not because of the value of Mar-a-Lago, but because this guy has 20 other loans that he has taken out and he has paid them all back with interest. He is a good customer. That's why we gave him the loan. On top of that, when you talk about tax assessed value versus the actual value of a property, this is something that they have been conflating throughout this entire case, right? Is that, oh, well, his property is $18 million. That's what Judge Mershon said. Judge Mershon says, oh, it's only worth $18 million because that's the tax assessed value. And in reality, this is a minimum $500 million property, if not close to $1 billion in real estate, because it's West Palm Beach. You can buy simple lots right next door for $20 million. And they're saying that his entire, I forget how many bedrooms and bathrooms, monstrous 20 some odd acres in West Palm Beach is only worth $18 million. It's obviously a fabrication. But in the end, when they say that this is a fraud case, the bank says we were never defrauded. We got all the money back. We gave him a loan. We did our due diligence because we know that a banking institution is not going to rely on the city's assessors or the state's assessors. They are going to rely on their own due diligence to make sure the actual value is there. And I gave a personal example the last time I talked about this, was that my wife and I had a commercial property. It was a dual-use commercial, part residential, part commercial. And the city came through and had people do their tax the tax assessors came through to assess the properties. They never stepped foot inside of our house or inside of our building. They increased our property value by 25%, but down the street, a larger facility that it had more renovations done to it, more improvements done to it from the outside when they looked at it, they actually dropped the value of that one by double digits. So ours, which we had not put more money into and was smaller, went up by 25%. Theirs, which was larger and had massive improvements done, went down. It makes zero sense, and the banks know this because nonsensical bureaucrats don't really understand what they're doing. These people are just out here marking stuff on a clipboard, and the bank is actually sacrificing or risking money to make an investment. And they just said, nope. Donald Trump is a reliable, we're happy. He's a reliable customer. He pays back his loans, so we're going to loan him the money. And it absolutely turned up. But the point I'm trying to make behind all this is that these nefarious actors, we say, no, our government would never do this. Our government is pure. Our government is righteous. Our government would never, sacrifice its people or do anything, have any ill will against its people. But Donald Trump deserves to pay $500 million or 400 and some odd million dollars. Because he's the evil guy. He's the true evil guy. Our priorities and our focus is wildly misdirected in so many instances. And I'm already coming up on my 30 minutes, and I was going to get into. I'll go ahead and show this post. So I know I kind of left the thing hanging there with the weather control and all of that, but I will leave that to your own discretion. You can feel free to go on the internet, read about. Project Cirrus, read about weather control, read about all the things that, in the 60s when we were trying to essentially weather bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we were seeding clouds during the Vietnam War to flood them with rain and try to slow down the movement of armaments and personnel along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You could read about that. You could say, no, they would never use it on the American people. However, I have far less trust in my federal government. I'm actually not going to hit this last one. I'll save it for another video because I'm already at my 30-minute time limit. I've got some great stuff. Scott Presler is doing some amazing things. What the Democrats have been doing, going out here and trying to find votes and knocking on doors and getting the mail-in ballots to people. Scott Presler was the guy the Republican Party hired. He's making amazing headway in places like Pennsylvania. I mean, the guy is setting the example. It's awesome. I was going to talk as well about the Yuri Bezmenov. If you've never heard of Yuri Bezmenov, he's I think it was it Bezmenov? I just lost my place. Yeah, Yuri Bezmenov. He was a former KGB guy, and he talked about the changes that needed to be made in society, how you attack education and religion and the family structure and all of these, I think it was 7.6 or 7 points that were the keys to the socialist overthrow of Russia in the USSR. These are the things that you have to attack if you want to put socialism and a dictatorship in place. And I was going to juxtapose that against the American system and how all of these things, religion, family, social structures, all this stuff has been changed. I'll get to that in the next episode. And I'm giving this to you just kind of as a teaser. I'm going to talk about how, when we talk about the hurricane, they came out and said that hate speech was playing a role in hurricane relief. I mean, just some really, really silly stuff. And what I will close on, and I know I'm sorry I'm bouncing around here, but I'm going to close on something weird because I think this is worth everybody seeing. You could say Donald Trump is evil and the Republicans are weird and this, that, and the other. Here's Gretchen Whitmer. There you go. There's a Democrat governor for you. Feeding Doritos to a girl on her knees. I don't know where you go with that. Let's end on an awkward note. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. God bless you. God bless America.